her name. Breonna Taylor. Say her name. Breonna Taylor.
A moment of celebration for the family and friends of Breonna Taylor. 4 current and former Louisville police officers have been arrested on federal charges in connection with Taylor's killing in March 2020.
Y'all learning what we've been saying was the truth, that they shouldn't have been there and that Breonna didn't deserve that.
Taylor was killed when Louisville police stormed her apartment looking for a drug dealer. Her boyfriend said police didn't announce themselves, and so he fired his gun at what he thought were intruders. Police shot back 22 times, hitting Taylor in the chest. Federal prosecutors say police knew they didn't have the evidence to justify raiding Taylor's home, but they did so anyway.
Earlier today, I spoke with the family of Breonna Taylor. This morning, they were informed that the Justice Department has charged 4 current and former Louisville Metro Police Department officers with federal crimes related to Ms. Taylor's death. Those alleged crimes include civil rights offenses, unlawful conspiracies, unconstitutional use of force, and obstruction offenses.
And happy Saturday, and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, August 6th. Good. Googity boo. We're barreling through the summer. It's been so hot, Val. Hey, that's Val Atkinson, by the way, who is usually here with me on Saturday morning. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed. Good to be here.
You know, it's been so hot. Yesterday, I think I felt physically ill from the hot heat and humidity. But you know, that's what summer is, I guess, in North Carolina. So I guess I have to grin and bear it. But we got a ton of stuff you saw in the preview coming in, Val. And the last clip in the preview was about Breonna Taylor. And we would be remiss not to talk about Miss Taylor and her murder and the fact that the state of Kentucky decided not to charge the police officers, but now Merrick Garland is. And you saw Merrick Garland in his presentation there. Val, tell me real quick why we're still at this point where black folks get murdered, then the police and the local authorities don't do anything about it. And then in the case of Breonna Taylor's murder, the state of Kentucky, they got a black attorney general. Now, he kind of reminds me of your boy down in South Carolina, Tim Scott, but let's leave that aside. Why are we still 2 years on just trying to deal with Breonna Taylor and then having to do it as a federal case again? We always seem to end up here.
I am so glad, Ed, that this case was handled by the Justice Department, because it brought out something that has been overlooked too much, too long in the whole process of issuing and applying for warrants, particularly no-knock warrants. It's almost unfair, the burden that's placed upon these judges to accept the information presented to them by detectives. These guys hold up their hands and admit under oath that the information that they're giving the judge is absolutely correct and true and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. When in fact, in many cases, they know that it is an absolute lie. And people get killed because of this. And I think that this one case should be the impetus to take a look at the entire warrant process and start taking a look at it from a legalistic standpoint, to talk about writing laws to clean up the mess, to overhaul it so this kind of thing never happens again. Some of these law enforcement officials have too much power. It's almost like an autocracy. People are just playing games. Some of these detectives make decisions on their own after the gathering of minutia in terms of evidence. They don't have enough, but once they convince themselves that John Doe did it, it's all over. They make the evidence and the discoveries fit the decision that they've already come up with in the beginning of the whole process. So that's got to stop.
Yeah. You know, one of the most troubling aspects of this, Val, is that in Merrick Garland's presentation, he talked about the fact that these officers met in a garage somewhere and cooked this whole thing up. They knew that this had gone south. They also knew that from the postal inspectors that no mail was coming there for the alleged person they were trying to track. There was no real connection, Breonna Taylor, to any drugs. Maybe her old boyfriend, but she had moved on from that person. And then the other aspect of it, Val, is that this thing about everybody should have a gun to protect themselves in their own home. And then so nobody, save one person, said that the police denounced themselves, and that was dubious. And so when Breonna Taylor's boyfriend at the time did respond by shooting at these people who he didn't know, he's got no support from people like the National Rifle Association and all these people who tell you that you should have a gun in your home to protect yourself. Talk to me a little bit about that aspect of it. Is that, how is it that when Philando Castile in Minnesota announces that he has a concealed carry permit, he ends up dead? He didn't reach for his gun. Why is it that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who is allowed to carry a weapon and is supposed to protect their home, tries to do that and use it? He's charged initially. He's the only person with charges and not the people that did the killing. I think I know the answer, Val, but you tell me. Well, why is it that colored people can't have guns?
It's race, and you're treating it nicely and kindly when you ask those type of questions. But it's about the business of race. I had won't give you all the information because you know who I'm talking about, but there was a officer of the courts in Durham, North Carolina, that said to me once, well, if the guy that's being charged, the perp, isn't guilty of the crime that we're trying to put on him, he did something somewhere at some point, so I don't feel bad about putting an innocent guy in jail. It's too much of that thought amongst police officers and law enforcement officials and officers of the court and those kind of things. They wanted to do they've made up their mind, as I said earlier, that this guy, we needed to go in there and shoot some people up. So we need to get together and say whatever we need to say to the judge to get permission to do that. And then after it's all over, as you alluded to, they get together and conspire to cover it up, to tell lies about it. And so they're going to be charged with and probably indicted and convicted of all of these things that they've done wrong. But race, to answer your question, is at the center of the problem that we're dealing with the way law enforcement behaves in America. And it is a big problem and nowhere near being solved.
Yeah, nowhere near being solved. The other thing, Val, is part and parcel of the right's message now. You talk about it often, that this fear of white replacement, right? In addition to that, there was a candidate in Michigan for governor who said that the reason why there's gun crime is because black people have guns. You know, that he boiled it all down to Negroes with guns. You know, just an aside, you're watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It's a Saturday in early August 2022. It's hot. People are upset about a whole bunch of different things, and we're starting off today talking about Breonna Taylor, who should still be working as a EMT in Louisville, Kentucky, but is not. She's dead. We know she's dead because of the way police perceive black folks and treat black people, and hopefully no-knock warrants will go away and some reform will happen because Breonna Taylor's life was sacrificed. You know, Val, I was watching Uptown Saturday Night the other night. I couldn't sleep, and it was on at 3 o'clock in the morning. And there was a scene in there where Bill Cosby is walking down the street, and the cops just accost him, and they arrest him, and take him downtown, and shake him down. And then he's like, why am I being, harassed? And it's like, well, you look like you're a criminal. So that is still the case. I mean, so it's not just a trope in a movie, it's reality. And it led to the death of Breonna Taylor, which is very unfortunate. Let's talk about another law and order case here. And this time we got to go across the pond, and we got to go to Russia. Let's take a look at this clip about Brittney Griner.
I love my family.
Brittney Griner has been sentenced to 9 years in jail by a Russian court. The U.S. basketball star was found guilty on drug smuggling and possession charges. She was arrested 6 months ago at a Moscow airport with vape cartridges containing cannabis oil. Before her sentencing, the two-time Olympic gold medalist pleaded with the judge for leniency.
My parents taught me two important things. One, take ownership for your responsibilities, and two, to work hard for everything that you have. That's why I pled guilty to my charges. I understand everything that's being said against me, the charges that are against me, and that is why I pled guilty. But I had no intent to break any Russian laws. I made an honest mistake, and I hope that in your ruling that it doesn't end my life here.
The sentencing could pave the way for an extraordinary U.S.-Russia prisoner swap. It could include 31-year-old Texan Griner and a Russian national imprisoned in the United States, Victor Bout, who was once one of the world's most prolific arms dealers.
Val Atkinson, Brittney Griner had some vape cartridges. You saw in the video there, they're inspecting her bag. She gets charged with being a drug trafficker. Courts in Russia don't operate like courts in the United States. Part of the video, you also see her in a cage. That's in the courtroom. They cage you up, and then the judge makes the decision. There's no jury sitting there. You got to try to sway the judge, and it seemed to me that this thing was going to go a certain way anyway. So first, tell me, were you surprised that she was convicted? And then second, 9 years in a penal colony in Russia, what does that mean?
Well, the cards were already stacked. The deck was already stacked. The cards to be played was already decided upon. Russia played this hand in the only way that they saw that it should be played. That is to go ahead and convict her, and then she becomes a better pawn to be used in this trading scheme that they want to participate in, to offer her up as a trading block for a couple of the other people that we may have, and maybe even some unmentionables that they desire that will not be talked about, will not be discussed. And most international deals that the public hears about is only part of the story. There are some things that both sides agree to not to discuss and not to divulge to the public. So there may be some other things. It could get as wild as, for an example, and I don't know, but it could get as wild as the United States pulling back some of its support from Ukraine. It could get as bad as lifting some of the sanctions that they have put in place financially against Russia itself. It could go several different ways. So we don't know, but they've played all of their cards, and they've said, okay, she's got 9 years. She's in our custody. The trial is over. We don't have a Supreme Court here that can overrule things like you guys have there. So now it's up to you. What are you guys willing to put on the table to sway me, to make me change my mind? That's where we are right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Here's another clip. This is Bill Barr, your favorite attorney general. I know you got a picture of him back there somewhere on your wall. Yeah. This is Bill Barr, former attorney general for Donald Trump, talking about his reticence to cut deals with people like
We
that.
also talked about the proposed prisoner swap with Russia.
As a former attorney general, what are your thoughts on the possible swap of convicted arms dealer Victor Bout for Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan?
Well, the department's always, at least when I was in the government, we're always consulted on that, and we're usually the stick in the mud. We're reticent about exchanges, but I agreed to quite a few of them. But I am concerned generally about encouraging this kind of behavior in the future, that is, the seizing of Americans in order to extort concessions from the United States. So this does sort of set the stage for that. So I'm worried about doing it too much.
So Val, Bill Barr says, okay, well, here we are. But if we cut these deals, like you're talking about, there are repercussions, right? That emboldens people to think that they can just kidnap Americans and then put shit on the table, and then you got a deal. Is Bill Barr going somewhere with this? I mean, do you have any trepidation about making these kind of deals? Victor Bout, the person that they're talking about making the deal for, he's a notorious arms smuggler, right? And there's some other people they may put on the table. Like you said, they may tell you can't do anything with Ukraine in exchange to get her back. What's too big of a price to pay to get Brittney Griner out of Russia?
Oh, there are a lot of things. The line is very broad that we could say no. I think what you have to go back to, though, Ed, to understand how Russia gets such leverage in this whole piece is the fact that it's not Brittney Griner. It is who she is as a person regarding her sexual orientation, who she is as a person regarding her cultural heritage, being an African American. These two groups are valued very highly by President Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. So they are pushing very strongly and heavily on Joe Biden and the Democratic Party to make some move to get this lady back. And Russia knows this. They are expert chess players over there, okay? So they're waiting and they're asking the questions. I've just made my move pawn to queen 4, whatever. I've just made that move. Now it's your shot. It's your time. And whatever move we make, they've already considered the counter moves already. If they do X, we're going to do Y. If they do Y, we're going to do Z, or whatever. So it's going to be a chess game from here out. And if we get Brittney Griner back, you can believe that there have probably been some under the table arrangements that we don't hear of. But let me give you one example of that. Let's go back to 1962, when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. The way it was played out to the public was that Khrushchev blinked, and he had his ships to turn around in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and take those missiles back to the Soviet Union and not deploy them in Cuba as he had planned to do. That's what we heard. So we won, right? Russia blinked. What the real agreement was that Russia said, we will turn back if you guys remove your missiles that you have in Western Europe countries that can strike medium-range missiles that can strike the Soviet Union. And we said, okay, but we can't talk about that publicly. You can't mention that. Russia, the Soviet Union agreed. They turned their missiles around. We pull our missiles out. Neither side talks about us pulling our missiles out. We go on the megaphone and brag that we made the Soviets blink. So that can be repeated again. That's the way diplomacy works.
Well, and I know, Val, that the story doesn't sound as cool when America isn't always on top. Right. And that's why you get the whole thing about Khrushchev blinking. And that's what was taught in schools. That's how I learned it when I was taking American history in middle school and high school. But anyway, I hear some music, Val, so that means we got to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. I want to talk about one of your frat brothers, Bill Russell, when we come back, in Nichelle Nicoles, who was on Star Trek. We want to talk about what's happening on the abortion front in America. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
The storm is unlike anything we've seen in 50 years. It's sweeping across the country, and now the Supreme Court has decided.
Abortion has been under attack. Many are wondering what will go next.
Tensions at the Supreme Court, specifically about.
We've all felt this storm coming. It's been building for a long time, sweeping across the country, destroying our freedoms. Now, the storm is here. They've stolen our right to control our own bodies, robbed our ability to decide our futures. And they plan to steal far more than abortion. But we're built for this. We don't stand by. We walk into the storm and turn its raw force into something transformative. Because we don't fight for the world as it was or as it is. We fight for a just world, for ourselves and generations to come. Together, we take back power over our bodies, our lives, our abortions, our futures. Together, we are a force of nature. Join us.
We have breaking news out of Indiana tonight. The state's legislature just passed new legislation banning abortion, making them the very first state legislature to do so since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Indiana's Republican governor has not said whether he will sign it. It comes after voters in the red state of Kansas created a political earthquake, turning out in record numbers to vote against an anti-abortion amendment to the state's constitution.
Voters in Kansas turned out in record numbers yesterday and overwhelmingly rejected a proposed amendment that would have removed the right to an abortion from the state constitution and opened the door to the Republican legislature passing restrictions or an outright ban. The Vote No side celebrated its victory last night.
I'm super proud to be from Kansas tonight, and I feel like my state just showed up and boldly told me that they are going to take care of me and my female friends and everyone that can get pregnant in the state of Kansas. We are protected tonight.
Miss Nichols, there's someone who wants to meet you. He says he's your greatest fan. And I'm thinking it's a trekker. So I went to turn around and look straight in the face of Dr. Martin Luther King, who was this beautiful smile on his face.
Any athlete of his era, Bill Russell came to define the word winner. And yet, whenever someone looks up at all 6'9" of Bill Russell, I just did, I always feel small next to him, and asks, "Are you a basketball player?" Surprisingly, he gets this more than you'd think, this question. He says, "No." He says, "That's what I do, that's not what I am. I'm not a basketball player, I am a man who plays basketball." Bill Russell, the man, is someone who stood up for the rights and dignity of all men. He marched with King. He stood by Ali. When a restaurant refused to serve the black Celtics, he refused to play in the scheduled game. He endured insults and vandalism, but he kept on focusing on making the teammates who he loved better players, and made possible the success of so many who would follow. And I hope that one day, in the streets of Boston, children will look up at a statue built not only to Bill Russell the player, but Bill Russell the man.
And welcome back to the second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ian Clark. The other dude is Val Atkinson. He's the resident know-it-all. He knows everything. That's why I have him on here. I make up a lot of stuff. So I need somebody to back me up who knows the real deal about history and politics and all that stuff, but also about sports. And Val, you used to play basketball. And I guess you're a fairly decent basketball player from what I hear. But we lost maybe one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Bill Russell, this past week. And in the clip on the way back in, you saw President Barack Obama giving him the Medal of Freedom for highest civilian award for the United States. Val, talk to me about your frat brother Bill Russell and his importance to not only basketball, but as Obama pointed out, to America and culture and civil rights and all that?
Well, let me start here by saying I'm glad you mentioned that he was frat brother, because we used to have a little arguments between the African American fraternities about who had the all-time best this and who had the all-time best that. And we used to brag a lot, Kappas, I belong to Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, that we had the best all-time legend basketball team. And our top five was Sam Jones at the point guard, who went to North Carolina Central University, Oscar Robertson at the shooting guard, Elgin Baylor, who played with the Lakers at the 3 position, Bill Russell at 4, and Wilt Chamberlain at 5. I mean, that is, all these are Kappa men. And we have lost all of them now, as Bill Russell has passed, with the exception of Oscar Robertson. Thank goodness he's still with us. But all of the rest have passed, have moved on. But what a 5. And we really appreciate Russell with his 11th championship, heading that up. Now, you want to talk about Bill Russell, the man, and what he did for the movement, as it were, in his day, when he was with Martin Luther King, and when he did things with Muhammad Ali, and he knew Malcolm X, and people like Adam Clayton Powell. And he did a lot of things that didn't come to light for the average person to know about. When certain restaurants wouldn't serve Black players on the Boston Celtics, it wasn't just a matter of him saying, okay, well, we won't try to spend our money here. We won't go around to the back and get meals if you won't let us walk through the front door. He went further. He decided they weren't going to play basketball that night so that you can come and cheer and forget about your 9-to-5 worries and be entertained. So he let people know that no, all is not well in America. There's still racism and prejudice and discrimination. And I, for one, am not going to stand for it. And that's the kind of individual Bill was. Many of his battles were uphill, but he stood and fought hard for them. And I'll tell you, we're missing a giant with his passing. And not just on the basketball floor, but in fights for rights of all people, not just Black folks, but for all people. So our personal,
yeah,
as a fraternity brother and as a civil rights leader.
You know, Val, one of the things I did this week, you know, I suffer from insomnia from time to time, and like I said, I ended up watching Uptown Saturday night in the middle of the night, but I also watched the NBA network, NBA TV played some old Celtics championship games. And I watched the 1962 championship, and then I watched one from 1968. And then the 6 years between those two games, the game really evolved. Bill Russell was a part of both, all of those games in between, because they won a whole bunch of championships. And one thing you saw was Bill Russell evolving as a player as well, right? And changing the game and speeding the game up. And you saw these Black players start to dominate the teams, where in that first game, you had Bob Cousy at point guard, and you had all these other, and then by the time you get to 68, 69, it's a whole different ball game. One of the things that I think that also struck me is by the time you get to towards the end of Bill Russell's career, he wasn't only the player, he was the coach. So I'm watching the game, I don't remember, I think it was 71 or 72. I see him on the court playing, and he calls a timeout, and he goes over, and everybody huddles around him, and he coaches the team, Val. Can you talk about how extraordinary that is? I mean, to wrap up this conversation about Bill, but how extraordinary it is. Could you possibly see LeBron James or somebody else being the player coach nowadays?
It is too much. It is too demanding, really, because while you're out there on that floor, you have so many things to do that it is almost impossible to be the best coach you could possibly be. Because as you are manipulating your way through playing on-ball defense, or if you have the ball and you're trying to move to the hole, there's so much of the other game that's going on that you can't see what the other 8 players are doing. This is you and the guy that's guarding you, or you and the guy that you're guarding. That's what a coach has to do. That's what a coach does on the bench. He's watching off-ball situations. And he knows what people are doing what the whole team is doing in reaction to what you're trying to do. So when he calls timeout, he has a play designed to take advantage of what they have been doing in response to what you do. As a player, it's very difficult to be trying to do what you're doing and watching all of that, watching the other 8 guys. I can't even fathom that, to being a coach, a playing coach nowadays, and doing well at both. I mean, the guy was tremendous.
Yeah, extraordinary. Yeah, the thing I'm gonna miss about him the most is his laugh. When he would laugh, it was you knew it was funny. You know, whatever he was laughing about, and sometimes he would laugh, and it was infectious, and other people would laugh. But also, he was also serious in that he did not shy away from saying what racism was in America. To play in Boston, of all places, right? Probably one of the more racist of the northern cities, and be venerated like he was is extraordinary, and we'll miss him. The other person, Val, that I want to talk about real quick, and I don't want to give her short shrift, but there was a little clip in the break as well of Nichelle Nicoles, who was on Star Trek. She was, in fact, a favorite of Martin Luther King, and you saw in the clip, and he wanted to meet her. One thing that people don't know about her is that she went to work for NASA. She was actually pretty smart, and she became a recruiter for NASA, and to try to get black folks involved in STEM, and way before it was popular. Not only was she a pretty lady, I had a crush on her, and maybe that's the reason I watched Star Trek, was more for her than anything else. But extraordinary, talented actress, but also involved in civil rights as well, right? So I guess to wrap this whole segment up about both Miss Nicoles and Bill Russell is, what's different about the famous black folks of now, and I'm not saying they don't do enough now to be involved in civil rights. They do. People do a lot. But what's different about them? Because those are 2 extraordinary people that you lose, and you don't seem to have replacements for, I guess is my point.
No, you don't have replacements for them. But getting to the root of your question also, Ed, is the fact that oftentimes the modern day athlete, as I like to call them, they didn't have to go through the firestorms of overt racism to the extent that we had to back in the 50s and the 60s. And it made them have substitutes for that. They saw different opportunities, and they, of course, have different measuring or yardsticks for success than we had back then. So I think they're working just as hard now. LeBron James does a lot. Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, CP3, just to name a few, who are working really, really hard to deal with this thing called social justice. And the number one guy in my mind, who's up there right now, nobody to replace him, is Colin Kaepernick. What he did, he almost sacrificed an entire career, who, by the way, is also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity.
I had a feeling you would get that answer.
Throw that out there. But these people need to be understood by the rest of us as being very, very special in what they do and how they do it. Because, like I said, the modern day athlete doesn't have to take a backseat to the people of Russell's era and that kind of thing. But I do think the people of Russell's era fought with less weapons and had a harder fight because of the overt racism that occurred.
Yeah. No doubt about that. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Hey, Val, I want to remind you and the listeners that you're watching The Deal or you're listening to us on one of our podcast platforms. That'll be Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you find your fine podcast, please encourage your people to subscribe because Val likes for people to listen and tell us what they think, and I like that too. You can also go to thedealwithedclark.com and then read my screeds against people acting stupid, and then soon to be a guy named Val Atkinson is going to join us, and he's going to write stuff for The Deal as well. And we're working on some other stuff as always. I know I had mentioned Val a few months ago about The Deal Radio. That got sidetracked a little bit, but that should be back on track. So by the fall, you should be able to listen not only to episodes of The Deal whenever you want to on The Deal Radio, but you'll be able to listen to some smooth jazz and some other music and stuff like that anytime you want to. And you'll be able to listen to it in your car and everywhere else. And the reason for that is because there is a dearth of good entertainment. Let's just say it that way. I won't criticize too many of the modern artists, Val, but I have a hard time listening to the music. I guess I'm a man of a certain age, right? So so let's switch gears. And we're going to switch gears really hard, right? We're going to go from second to fifth here because I want to talk about a guy named Alex Jones. We have had a lot of mass shootings in America, and one of the worst mass shootings of all time was a bunch of kindergartners, Val, in Sandy Hook. And Alex Jones has made a living, and I heard a number that was astonishing. At one point, he was making, several $100 million a year, almost $300 million a year, by denying that Sandy Hook even happened. He was saying that the children weren't real and the parents were actors and so on and so forth. But before we get too far into that, let's watch Alex Jones getting his comeuppance here. This is a Perry Mason moment, for real. This is Alex Jones.
So you did get my text messages. And it said you didn't. Nice trick.
Yes, Mr. Jones. Oh. Indeed. You didn't give this text message to me. You don't know where this came from. Do you know where I got this?
No.
Mr. Jones, did you know that 12 days ago, your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message you've sent for the past 2 years, and when informed, did not take any steps to identify it as privileged or protect it in any way. And as of 2 days ago, it fell free and clear into my possession. And that is how I know you lied to me when you said you didn't have text messages about Sandy Hook. Did you know that?
I told you the truth. This is your Perry Mason moment. I gave them my phone, and then...
Mr. Jones, you need to answer the question.
No,
Did you know this happened?
No, I didn't know this happened. But I mean, I told you I gave them the phone over.
Just
and
answer the question.
You said in your deposition, you searched your phone. You said you pulled down the text, did the search function for Sandy Hook. That's what you said, Mr. Jones, correct?
And I had several different phones with this number, but I did, yeah. Well, of course. I mean, that's why you got it.
No, Mr. Jones, that's not why.
Val, now, either he has the worst attorney in the whole entire world, or his attorney was sandbagging him. I haven't been able to figure out which one it is. So Alex Jones is on the stand. The question is, have you ever denied Sandy Hook, and have you sent text messages about Sandy Hook? He says no. Val, they have his whole cell phone record sent from his attorney. Make some sense of that for me, Val. First, about how Alex Jones has been able to make a living off of this, but karma is real. he got his ass handed to him here. Talk to me about Alex Jones.
That's a litigant's worst nightmare, probably, to know that you, and find out when everybody else finds out that you have incompetent representation. Have your attorney to send information directly to the prosecution that shouldn't be having that. That's got to be, he's got to be turning over inside. Alex was to find out what happened. And, when he would take a look at his attorneys, I guess they would sheepishly look at the floor or something of that nature. But it's the worst thing that could happen. But probably for the rest of us, the best thing that could happen to him for what he has done. The agony, the pain that he would put those parents through that had suffered the loss of a child, of a mere child. And he makes them go through that agony and pain again by even mentioning the fact that it maybe didn't happen and that it was a hoax. And he did it all for $1. He did it all to make $1 more than he would have made otherwise. And whatever comes out of this, Ed, for him, whether it is 45 million, 450 million, it's going to be considered to be light punishment for what he should have gotten based on what he's done. So we got a lot of court information coming up. There are a lot of laws that talk about capping the amount of civil judgments and those kinds of things that we don't know where this is going to end up, whether it's going to be the Supreme Court or someplace below that. But at any rate, I think the message has to be that we as a nation can't tolerate people like Alex Jones. We need to make sure that they don't have a platform or don't have the ability to spew their horrible messages and make life even worse for people who need to be soothed right now, instead of having to relive the very worst moments of their lives.
Yeah, free speech is one thing, but what Alex Jones did and continues to do. I mean, even during the trial, it was proven that he was sending out stuff about the judge, right? And clearly he had perjured himself during this whole proceeding, just by him saying that he hadn't been saying anything about Sandy Hook in his text messages, and there they were. He had turned over everything. He had not. And save for his lawyer either making a mistake. If you're listening to me, you didn't see me do the air quotes, but the mistake that his lawyers made in sending out his cell phone records. I mean, maybe they had a crisis of conscience and decided to throw him under the bus. I don't know. I can't tell, Val. But it makes me think about one other thing about Alex Jones, and we hadn't talked about this yet because a lot of times we'll talk about what we're going to talk about before we come on. In Texas, Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, was speaking to CPAC. And he was palling around with Hannity and Tucker Carlson and, damn it, I got to say it, Donald Trump. And so that means I got to play something about Donald Trump, so we'll do that when we come back. But Viktor Orban was here. And he comes out of the same strain as this Alex Jones character, right? Because Alex Jones is a character. He may be racist. He probably is. but he also plays this character for effect and for money, right? Sean Hannity is the same way. He's a character. Tucker Carlson's a character. I'm pretty sure when they get off camera, they don't act in a particular way, because they would not go and hang out with the Klan, right? They're like this cleaned up version of the Klan. You know what I'm saying? They don't put on hoods or whatever. So here's the question, Val. We know these people are out there. And we know there's going to be another Alex Jones to emerge because it makes money. How do you balance free speech and trying to deal with people like Alex Jones? How can you be fair and say, well, you know, we live in America, we got First Amendment?
Got to be tough. In other words, you got to be unafraid to indict people, put them in jail, and don't worry about what the consequences are. We are right now, we want to do everything so perfectly that we have a perfect record on appeal, that we have a perfect record at the Supreme Court, that nobody disagrees with the decisions that we made. We got to forget about all of that. There's no such thing as perfection. All is fair in love and war, okay? And this is war we're in right now, folks, okay? And you've got to go out to win. If you have a system that won't allow you to fight for its continuance, won't allow you to fight to save its life, the system ain't worth having. The system ain't worth having. So what you've got to do is to say that whatever we need to do, let's go do it. And let's not worry about what people like Alex Jones think, or his supporters, or whether or not he told the truth over here, or here's the evidence that he lied over there. Do what needs to be done to save the system if you love it, and worry about all of this other stuff later. And I think one of the things, and this is for my Democratic friends that I always have to give them a little piece of my mind, is to my Democratic friends, you have to stop trying to convince the crazies like Alex Jones and Alex Jones supporters to change your mind and come to your senses and realize that you've been wrong and do the right thing. I don't know how much time these people waste on still trying to do that. They spend all kinds of time trying to do that. And guys like Alex Jones, they take advantage of this crazy stuff and use it to make more dollars.
Yeah.
Hey, the Democrats are accusing me of so-and-so. They're saying this. Let me tell you what the truth is. Boy, he just made another $100 million, you know?
Yeah, they make a lot of money off it, Val. You know what? This is a good time to take a break, and when we come back, the aforementioned Donald Trump, which I did not want to talk about. We're going to have to. And I found a clip that I want you to hear. It's Bill Barr again, your buddy Bill Barr. And we're going to hear from him. We're also going to talk about Nancy Pelosi and her trip to Taiwan and what the ramifications of that are, and monkeypox. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Disaster tips from the objects left behind.
My home wasn't insured, but you can check your insurance policy now to make sure you're covered. Oh.
My savings are lost, but you can put money aside and plan for unexpected disaster costs.
We're lost forever, but you can scan important documents now so they survive.
For more tips on how to prepare, visit ready.gov.
On January 6th, do the new grand jury subpoenas suggest that the Justice Department investigation is squarely focused on former President Trump?
Well, I think it definitely is a significant event. Changes my view of what's been going on. From my standpoint, it looked to me like the department is really focusing on the lower level people. As you know, since the election, they've been going after the people who went into the Capitol. And I didn't think they were paying that much attention to the higher-ups, and they were sort of leaving it to the congressional committee. But this suggests to me that they're taking a hard look at the group at the top, including the president and the people immediately around him who are involved in this. And it also looks to me like they're going to try to get a ruling on the issue of executive privilege.
Did it get your attention? Back to our third and final segment of the deal. That's Val Atkinson. I'm Ed Park. It is Saturday, August 6th. As always, we're solving all the world's problems in an hour. So we talked about Breonna Taylor at the beginning. We talked about Brittney Griner. We talked about Alex Jones. We talked about Bill Russell. We talked about Nicoles. We talked about Uptown Saturday Night with Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby. We've talked about a lot of stuff, Val. But in the break, coming back in, we saw your buddy Bill Barr again. He's made 2 appearances on the program today. And this time he's talking about 1-6. There have been some subpoenas issued by Merrick Garland, who we've also seen today, to get people to start talking about 1-6. We know the 1-6 committee hearings are on hiatus right now, Val, but there have been some bombshells in that. And one of the things that I have been critical of Merrick Garland about, and I know you have too, and a lot of other people, is like, what the hell are you doing? When the hell are you going to start dragging these people from the top in? And Bill Barr says in his assessment that this is a whole different thing. They were going after the little guy, and this means that they're at the top. So, right before we came on, I heard the former Attorney General, Mr. Holder, say that he expects indictments. So, Val Atkinson, tell me, do you expect indictments of people higher up? And what does that mean? Because we thought that Merrick Garland was afraid to indict because they didn't want to indict a past president.
I think that there will be indictments. I think that Merrick Garland would be making the right move to indict. And I agree, Ed, with those who say that the only thing worse than indicting would be not indicting. And I think that would be really the worst thing that could happen to the Republic as we know it right now. And Merrick Garland in particular, because of his background and what he's gone through, it would just destroy him. Here he's got an opportunity to make amends for what they did to him, and looks like he doesn't have the courage to act. This would be horrible for him. So I think there will be indictments. Now, I think that also that Donald Trump stands a good opportunity to have it overthrown through the appeal process. Because the higher you go through appeal, the more crazies that are there on his side. But one of the things that I've always said, that if he gets measured for orange jumpsuit, it won't be because of insurrection or inciting a riot or all of this kind of stuff. It will be for perjury. Donald Trump is not very good at saying things that he ought to say or ought not to say at the right or the wrong time.
You mean saying things that are true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So I suspect that he'll be brought up on charges of perjury, and they'll try to make a deal. One of the things would be that he'll never run for office again, but that ain't going to be enough for people like me and you. I suspect that Donald Trump will be, he'll be one of the other first. He was the first president that's ever been impeached twice. He'll be the first president ever indicted and convicted. He'll be the first president that ever served time in jail after he served time as president of the United States.
Well, I tell you what, if that happens, I'm having a party. I'm gonna have the party when they serve an indictment. I'll be happy with that, Val, because I know why he became president. We're clear on that. They were tired of the colored guy.
Yeah.
I have come to the conclusion, Val, that that being honest about this is the best policy, because at some point there will be a time when everybody's brown here, or most people will be brown in America, and that may be the time where the white supremacists become the most violent. I mean, not that they weren't violent in the past. We were lynched and all kind of stuff for hundreds of years. But when they get completely desperate and they try to overthrow the government, or they try to put people in office who can overthrow the government, like, trying to put in secretaries of state or whatever who would have carte blanche to nullify an election, they're desperate. And Donald Trump is the tip of the iceberg here. He is not, and I think you're fond of saying this, Val, is not about Donald Trump. It's about the underlying historical context here that racism permeates the United States, whether people want to believe it or not, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that we were born, we meaning the United States of America, we were born out of slavery, racism, and although slavery and racism is supposedly been officially eradicated from our system, from our way of life, the de facto standing is that it's still here and it still rules the roost. It's who we are and what we're about. And the far right has decided that they can't win normal elections anymore because of what you've alluded to as the browning of America. So they don't care. They really don't. They could care less what happens to this thing called the rule of law or whatever. If they can't win that way, they'll win the only way they know how. That is the rule of the gun and overthrow of government. That's what they've resorted to right now. So they could care less about something called the law.
Yeah.
It's the same decision that was made in 1776. They stopped trying to negotiate with the British to get fair treatment and that kind of thing. They just said, screw it. We don't care nothing about the law anymore. It's the same thing they tried in 1861. They said, screw it. We don't care about 1850 laws and 1854 laws and 1820 laws. We're going to go to war to save slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Val, before we get out of here, there's two other stories, and I want you to see a clip about Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan.
China is to suspend cooperation with the United States on issues including military relations, climate change and legal help in criminal matters. Now, this is in response to the visit of US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. The visit's enraged Beijing, which regards the self-governing island as its territory. This latest announcement follows days of intensive Chinese military drills in the waters surrounding the island.
Chinese missiles began striking the seas north, south, and east of Taiwan hours after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi left the island. Chinese state television released video of warships patrolling the Taiwan Strait, for decades an unofficial buffer zone between China and Taiwan. As fighter jets cruise the skies above, air cover for the multiple no-go danger zones declared by China in some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world.
So that's from German TV, and they're talking about China's reaction to Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and to Korea, but more specifically to Taiwan. So China's shooting missiles into the strait there between Taiwan and mainland China, and also near Japan. What does it mean? Because I've been trying to figure this out. Why does Nancy Pelosi stick a flag in the ground and says, I'm going to Taiwan regardless? What does that, why pick that as a battle, particularly right now when you got Russia and Ukraine and the economy suffering because of international incidents or whatever. Why do that now?
Please put me on the side that's trying to figure it out too. I can't figure her out. What she's doing this for, it's beyond me. You didn't need to do this. It's unnecessary provocation, and we're getting what we look at here. I mean, you've got to understand that these people that inhabit the island of Taiwan, they don't speak sweet Yiddish. They don't speak German. They don't even speak Spanish over there. These are Chinese people with the cultures of the mainland. They're 80 miles from the mainland of, or the China mainland, as it's called. 80 miles. That is closer than Miami is from Cuba. From Miami to Cuba is about 90 miles. Or from Key West to Cuba is about 90 miles. So why are we insisting that these people somehow don't belong to the Chinese? It's because they've adopted Western culture and Western values, and we want to keep it that way. They do a lot of work in the IT world, and we don't want China to have control of all of that stuff. And we got to go begging the Chinese to give us some chips so we can put our automobiles out on the road, right? So that's the real purpose behind it. But I think we're going about it the wrong way. I don't think we're going to get the Chinese to, give in to having Taiwan be the 51st state, or having Taiwan to join NATO of all places. You know what I mean? I mean, how far do we go with this kind of thing? After a while, what you're doing is pushing China right into the arms of the Russians. And both these guys are going to be saying, hey, they're trying to triangulate both of us. They're trying to get both of us not to help the other, while they isolate both of us to try to kick our butt. And this little country of 4.6% of the planet wants to rule the world, more so than they're already doing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think they know what's going on. Nancy, I got to ask her a question. What are you doing, girl? Come on back to reality and let's get this thing going. This is a serious piece. This Taiwan thing is more serious than Ukraine.
Yeah, well, that's a lot to say because we know that gas prices went completely haywire over Ukraine, and then also food prices, because things like wheat and barley and those kind of things are grown in large quantities in Ukraine and haven't been able to get out. And now we got this thing with Taiwan, and now we're so dependent on, like you said, microprocessors and chips and that kind of thing.
Well, it ain't just that, Ed. It's that too. But the next time you go to a place like Walmart or Target or wherever, just get in that cart and ride around and look at all of the merchandise where it says made in whatever, and see how many places you see, how many things that you see made in China. And imagine all of those things off the shelf, because that's what's going to happen if we get into a conflict. They're not going to help us financially. So they stop sending us everything they are sending us right now. Everything.
Yeah. And that's the calculation that people haven't thought about. Yeah. You're absolutely correct. I guess, like I said, if you got to go and try to make ends meet and you spend your time at any store, you see how many tags that say made in China. Right. Hey, Val, before we run out of time, I got one last story that we need to cover, and it's about monkeypox. So let's take a look at it, and then we'll wrap it up.
It is now a public health emergency, and cases of monkeypox continue to pile up here in Georgia. New numbers out tonight from the CDC show the state 6th in the nation in cases with 596. That's close to 8% of all reported cases in the country. Can monkeypox be passed in the same way as COVID-19?
They are not similar in the way they're transmitted. Whereas someone could have gotten COVID or could get COVID, through, a prolonged conversation or talking to someone or someone sneezing, coughing, that doesn't seem to be happening with monkeypox.
Dr. So about a couple months ago, monkeypox came on the scene. It was kind of funny, haha, monkeypox. Funny name, right? But not so funny in that in the clip you saw there, that was from the Atlanta market, and they were saying that Georgia is the 6th most infections of monkeypox. We've seen it in North Carolina where we are, and just about every state is now reporting some cases of monkeypox. The vector for transmission seems to be contact skin to skin, and there's no record of it being transmitted like COVID, which you also saw in the clip. But one of the things that struck me, Val, is that a lot of the stories that I've been hearing is because of, again, gay men and multiple sex partners, sometimes multiple people having sex at the same time, is the main vector of spread for this. And that may be, and I've heard from some people in the LGBTQ community who say that's why nobody's taking it serious. That's why it's hard to get vaccinations and that kind of thing, is because people are being discriminated against. Talk to me real quick about, where we are with this compared to something like when the AIDS epidemic started, when we knew that the main people getting it were gay and bisexual men, and it took a long time for people to take it serious, and then by the time it was all over, maybe 1 million or so people had died from AIDS, and AIDS is still around, but there are treatments for it. Is there any validity to what the gay and lesbian, well, not lesbian, but gay and bisexual and transsexual community is saying about how we're not taking monkeypox seriously?
Well, not that it's been published anyway, not that I've seen. But there is a correlation there also with the way the broader community exposes this stuff to the public. And that is having to do with, if you go back to COVID, for an example, they wanted to attach it to Wuhan. The president of the United States at that time, number 45, wanted to call it Kung Flu. And they wanted to attach it that way. Then you had the AIDS epidemic. When that first started, there was this connection with LGBTQ community, with Africa, and so forth. And the last thing, the first time I was exposed to this whole business of monkeypox, it showed a global map of where outbreaks of monkeypox was in the world. And it showed the United States, Canada, Europe, and Russia, primarily. Everything north above the equator. I mean, all of those places that have mainly Caucasian populations. This is where the monkeypox. But when they showed commercials or signs of what monkeypox looked like, it was these black hands with all of the bumps and blisters on it. So, why does that make sense? If the outbreak is in white countries, why are you showing me a set of black hands with blisters on them to convince me of what? To make a correlation between the black hands and the title of the disease, monkeypox? It's just so much that is put into the whole racial context of so many things that it is, to say existential is maybe even putting it lightly.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Val, you know what? We come full circle. We started out with Breonna Taylor, which was clearly about race, and we end with monkeypox, which the way it's been framed has clearly been about race. In nearly every story, race or has played a part. Brittney Griner, how she's being treated. Then the 1/6 insurrection, how those people were treated differently than had a gang of Negroes try to storm the Capitol. I can't even imagine how many dead black folks there would have been had they been trying to storm the Capitol. So we've covered a lot of ground today. So you know what that means, Val. Before we leave, you got to tell me what you're working on, what we need to pay attention to. Talk to me.
I'll talk to you and say that coming shortly, a blog entitled A Piece of My Mind will be a part of the deal with Ed Clark, and it will probably be published bi-weekly, and it'll be just that, folks, a piece of my mind, and I'll be welcoming comments and input from you, the reading public.
But there you go. And on a programming note, tomorrow, which is Sunday, the 7th of August, Val Atkinson is going to be on Connections on Foxy 107, 104. You see the logo right there. And he'll be on there talking about stuff, some of the same stuff we're talking about here today. And but always try to catch that when you can, but definitely come back here and catch the deal. Go to thedealwithedclark.com, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, anywhere fine podcasts are heard. And if you want to see our faces, you can always go to the website. You can go to Facebook, and you can also go to Spotify if you want to see our lovely faces and see the video version. Share it with your friends, folks. We do this because we care. Not just because we want to hear ourselves talk, but we do really care. So, you know what I need for you to do today? Go do some good for somebody today and come back here next Saturday for another edition of The Deal. You've been watching The Deal.